The source book, the source texts of the Vedanta are the Upanishads. In fact, the definition of Vedanta, the traditional definition of Vedanta is Vedanta nama Upanishad pramanam. What is Vedanta? If you ask a classical Sanskrit scholar, what is Vedanta? He will say, Vedanta is the source of knowledge known as the Upanishads. Vedanta means Upanishads, the texts called Upanishads. What are these Upanishads? They are part of the fundamental spiritual texts, religious texts, the scriptures of the Hindus, the Vedas. The four Vedas, Rig Veda, Sama Veda, Yajur Veda, Atharva Veda, these are the fundamental, the core spiritual, the scriptural texts of the Hindus. And these Vedas are vast, there's a vast corpus of literature. Most of them deal with rites, rituals. Many of us, we have seen in the Vedanta societies the fire sacrifice which is performed, the home of fire. So that traces its origins back to the rituals of the Vedas. Now, towards the end of the Vedas, sometimes in the middle of the Vedas, you find these texts which set forth the highest philosophical wisdom. So these texts are called Upanishad or Vedanta, the culmination of Vedanta, the end of Vedanta. Sometimes they're literally at the end of certain Vedic Samhitas, sometimes they're in the middle, but they set forth the highest wisdom of the Vedas. So they are called Vedanta, the end, the culmination, the highest knowledge, Vedanta. Veda literally means knowledge. Here it means spiritual knowledge. There are many Upanishads. But among them, 10 Upanishads are of particular interest and importance. And these 10 are important because some 1300 years ago, Adi Shankaracharya selected them for commenting, for writing commentaries, extensive explanations. So these are the central Upanishads upon which Advaita Vedanta is based. Isha Upanishad, Kena Upanishad, Katha Upanishad, Prashna Upanishad, Aitairya Upanishad, Taittiriya Upanishad, Mundaka Upanishad, Mandukya Upanishad, Chandogya Upanishad, Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. The 10, we call them major Upanishads because Shankaracharya commented upon them. Some of them are very small. Isha Upanishad, Mandukya Upanishad is the smallest. Some are very big. Brihadaranyaka, Chandogya, these are very big Upanishads. Some of them are in verse, mantras in verse. Some of them are in prose. They are very old. Even by modern reckoning, they are maybe 30 centuries old, 3,000 years, 4,000 years old. By tradition, they are ageless because they were revealed by God to the Upanishadic seers. They are records of spiritual experiences, timeless spiritual experiences coming through the sages of the Upanishads, the rishis. They have been set forth in poetic language there. And the essence of the Upanishads was taken by Sri Krishna and set forth in the book which is the most well-known book of the Hindus, the Bhagavad Gita. So the Bhagavad Gita, the song of God, God here means Krishna, the song of God, Bhagavad Gita, is the essence of the Upanishads. There's a verse which says that the Upanishads are the cows, and the one who milked these cows was Krishna, and we got the milk, the nectar-like milk is the Bhagavad Gita. So the essence of the Upanishads we find in the Bhagavad Gita. It's a practical approach to the Upanishads. What do we do? What is the knowledge of the self? How do we meditate? How do we analyze our life? Bhakti, jnana, dhyana, karma, all these things you find in Bhagavad Gita. But the Bhagavad Gita is firmly rooted in the Upanishads. So that's also Vedanta. There's another text, not discussed so much, called the Brahma Sutras, not discussed with very good reason. Because if you think this is dry and philosophical, you should try the Brahma Sutras. I remember when I became a monk, a novice, so the first thing I did was I visited the library looking for books and Vedanta books, and I took the biggest, shiniest book I could find. That was the Brahma Sutras, English translation by Swami Gambhiranandaji. Brahma Sutras, Sanskrit commentaries, translation by Swami Gambhiranandaji. One of the most dense books in human civilization. I pulled it out and I asked, and I told Swami that I've got a book on Vedanta which I plan to start. And he asked, oh, what book is that? I said, it's something called Brahma Sutras, commentary of Shankaracharya translated by Swami Gambhirananda. And so the Swami said, oh, that book, you won't go beyond a single page, beyond the first page. And that scared me so much that I put it back in the library immediately. It's only after I came to the training center and I started, it was taught to us, then I started reading it. So there are 555 aphorisms, sutras. Sutras are compact sayings. And these aphorisms, a lot of meaning is packed into each sutra. And there are 555 of these. What are these? These are basically reasoning, philosophical reflection upon the Upanishads. Upanishads are poetry. They are mystical. Now, if you want to understand them, if you have got questions about it, we talk about Brahman, existence, consciousness, bliss. Where is this blessed Brahman? You say the world is false. How is the world false? And what do you mean the world is false? In what sense is it false? I am not the body and the mind. I am spirit. What is spirit? How am I not the body and the mind? The aim of life is God realization. What do you mean by God realization? Can you precisely tell us? All these things are discussed threadbare. I can see a lot of interested looks, but I warn you. First, let's finish this before we go into the Brahma Sutras. Now, Shankaracharya, he wrote commentaries on the Upanishads, on the Bhagavad Gita, and on the Brahma Sutra. And these Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita and Brahma Sutra taken together with the commentaries are called Prasthanatraya, the threefold canon of Vedanta. The threefold canon, the canonical texts of Vedanta, central texts of Vedanta. The Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, and Brahma Sutras. Especially when we consider Vedanta as a philosophical system, the Brahma Sutras are important. So Brahma Sutras with Shankaracharya's commentary forms the basis of the philosophical system known as Advaita Vedanta, the non-dual interpretation of Vedanta. There are other types of Vedanta, different flavors of Vedanta, if you will. Different flavors. You go to a shop, ice cream shop, you have a lot of different flavors of ice cream. So there are different flavors, different types of Vedanta, depending on the interpretation, especially on the interpretation of the Brahma Sutras. So Shankaracharya's commentary, Brahma Sutra Bhashya, is the basis of the philosophy of non-dual Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta. There were others. Ramanujacharya, the great qualified non-dualist. He wrote the Sri Bhashya commentary on the Brahma Sutras. And that forms the philosophical basis of the system known as Vishishtadvaita Vedanta. Madhvacharya wrote the Purna Prajna Bhashya on the same Brahma Sutras, which forms the basis, the philosophical basis of the great system known as Dvaita Vedanta. Nimbarkacharya, he wrote a Bhashya called the Vedanta Parijata Bhashya on the Brahma Sutras, which forms the basis of the system known as Dvaitadvaita Vedanta. Vallabhacharya wrote the Anu Bhashya on the Brahma Sutras, which forms the basis of another system of Vedanta called Shuddhadvaita Vedanta. And there are others too. There is the Govinda Bhashya on the Brahma Sutras, which forms the basis of Achintya bheda, the philosophical system of the Gaudiya Vaishnavas. If that doesn't draw any sign of recognition, the Hare Krishnas, so they are rooted their tradition is rooted in the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, which is a stream of Vedanta, which has Achintya bheda Vedanta at its core. So these are varieties of Vedanta.